My name is Joe Hawkins. I'm Staff Sergeant. I went in April '42 and got out in '46. I was drafted. I signed up in Georgia and worked in Florida, and I worked with my daddy, and in the summer times, and went to school in Tampa. But I'd signed up in Georgia. So when I was drafted from Georgia, and I came up to Georgia to Fort McGillum, and I stayed there until I was sent to Fort Bragg, and was in Fort Bragg, and with the 82nd Airborne, and and they called me in the office and told me that they had people that could pull triggers, but they didn't have people that could do construction work, and that they basically were going to change me from that to do construction work. And so they sent me to New Orleans to Camp Harahan, and I stayed in Camp Harahan. I went to schools, the Army schools down there, one for welding and mechanics and one for truck driving. And when we left Harahan, we went to Fort Shanks in New York, and that's where we loaded up to go to England. When we got on the ship and everybody was on board, the ship was hit by a tanker. We had to go back in port, and we stayed in port until the repairs was made on the ship, which was the SS Mauritania. And we stayed on the ship there until they got the repairs made. Then we'd missed the convoy, so we went through the North Sea, and we landed in Liverpool. And we stayed there in Liverpool for several days, and then we were sent down to Cardiff, Wales. And I stayed there in Cardiff, Wales until the time for our embankment to go to the war, where in France, in the Normandy invasion. I was in a heavy trucking unit, and I got my legs mashed there, and after they put me in the hospital, and I thought with all them guys that's all shot up and beat up and everything, I didn't have any business in that hospital with just a couple of bruises and things on my legs. And I flagged the truck down, and the guy said he was going down the road, and I asked him if I could ride, and he told me just to get in. So we went down the road, and I caught up with my unit, and we went on with my unit, and I stayed with them until we got settled where we was going. After we got with our unit, we stayed there at different places. And we went to St. Lo, and we were in the Battle of St. Lo, and I guess that was the only real combat missions that I did, except that when the Battle of the Bulge, everybody went to the Battle of the Bulge, making difference if you was a cook or anything. You were a musketeer then, and so you went to the Battle of the Bulge. And I left there and went back to Le Havre, France, and I stayed in Le Havre, France until they sent me home. We had to maintain all the equipment that we had. We had over 106 cranes and tractors, and so after we got all settled up, we had to rebuild those things to where they sold them to the French government. And our unit hauled all these things all during the war. We hauled tanks, we hauled cranes and big trucks and whatever the engineering groups were restoring bridges and things needed. We hauled that stuff to them, and we got all that stuff down there. And we brought in the stuff that needed to be repaired, the tanks and things. We brought them back and we repaired them, and we rebuilt the Army tugs and things that were there. And we had to help the Seabees clean the harbors out so ships could come into the harbors. And we helped them do that. And it was an advantage for us because the Navy had good food and we didn't. Right, because LSTs couldn't come in. It was mostly just LCBPs came in and dumping the soldiers. So when we came in there and to unload the tanks and the trucks and things, because we had tank retrievers. This is what we had. I think I said we was in the third wave, because we brought stuff in where they could build the pontoon bridges, where you get trucks and things out on the bridge to unload the ships that was far away. And of course they had ducks and things that run back and forth, and the ducks weren't very dependable. I see the most was the fellow running towards me, and his stomach was cut open, and he was holding his guts in his stomach, and his eyeball was hanging up. And never will forget that, I guess, as long as I live. And he was just hollering and screaming. And you see him laying there with his arms cut off, and some of them just still floating in the water. And you don't really have time to ignore all that stuff. It just, some of it just sets in your mind, and some of it doesn't. We went into the town part of it. At one time I captured a German soldier, and he was an old man. I'd say old, he was in his 40s. Back then he was older than me. But I captured him, and he was talking about, and I didn't speak German, but anyway, I took his wallet out, and he had a picture of his wife and 3 or 4 little old kids. And I gave him his wallet back, and the old sergeant behind me said, shoot the SOB. And I wasn't going to shoot the man, him standing there in front of me like that. Nay, that ain't no way to do. And my mama raised me better than that. But the MPs happened to come up, so I gave him to the MPs. And I took his rifle. I still have his German rifle. And we hauled all that stuff everywhere they wanted to go. And then when he got ready to cross the Rhine, we loaded those LCBPs on the back, on the trailers, and we hauled them things to the Rhine River. And it was a chore to carry cranes and things over there because the streets were so narrow and everything. So when you carried one, you had to go through a little town. If it had a sharp turn, somebody had to be in that crane so they could swing the boom around out of the way to keep from taking the top of the building off. Oh yeah, we went into Saint-Lô. That was the biggest battle that we was in, and it was a case of you shoot or get shot, and we did that for, I guess, 3 days. We stayed there and we shoot each other or shoot at each other or something. And finally they moved enough troops in there. Boy, mines was everywhere. And so when we got to this one place, we saw the signs out there, Meaningful. That was in a minefield. And so when the Germans was all lined up out there that we'd captured, and we told them to go out there and get the mines. So they went out there and they dug up a few and they brought them back and told, and this sergeant that we had, Sergeant Meinhardt, he was a German, he spoke German, and his folks were German, but he was a master sergeant in our company. And he said, "Y'all got," asked him if they had all. "Yeah, we got them all." So he lined them all up in close quarters. He says, "We'll march through the field." And boy, they went out there and they dug up a bunch of more. And after they got them all stacked back up there again, then he marched them back out there again. They had the biggest ones that they had, and I've seen, he blow some guy, he broke clean apart. They call them bouncing betties. And you'd step on one, and it would jump up out of the ground about that far and explode, and it'd blow you to pieces. We loaded most all our people up on 6x6s. We drove down there to the bulge. The bombers came over, and they'd come over that sometimes, and it would look like clouds. It would block the sun. There'd be so many of them. And they bombed this one town in Metz that we went into. And what had happened, they'd bombed that place, and we was going through the old building, and the woman, I guess she died of concussion, but she was taking a bath, and she was still in the bathtub, but she was dead. But you see a lot of people that all mangled up and everything, and you wonder what the hell is war for anyway. I just don't see it. I guess when I used to go to my girlfriend's house for supper, she was my interpreter. Her name was Monique, and she thought we was going to get married, and I hadn't planned on getting married, but she had two sisters, and it was just the three girls. And the older sister wanted to get married, and the mother was disappointed because she couldn't afford a wedding dress for her. And she wanted to have a white silk wedding dress. Well, you couldn't buy silk. You couldn't hardly buy cotton. Anyway, I went to down there at the headquarters and I asked the old sergeant in there, I said, "You got a white parachute?" And he said, "Yeah." And the parachutes were made out of silk. And I said, "Well, how much you want for it?" And he looked at me, and I had an Omega watch I'd bought. Man, I was proud of that thing. Everybody don't have a Omega watch. And he said, I'll trade you that parachute for that watch. I said, okay. So I traded him my watch for that white parachute so her mama could make her a wedding dress. And I carried that thing back to her mama, and I thought her mama was going to leave her husband for me. The only time we ever had a place with a bed was we stayed at a fort de Tourneville, and the thing was so little, we had to take the curbs up in there to get the trucks and things in there because it was so narrow. But we had one night there. Everybody had gone to had bunk beds in there because the French army had used it. A German had gotten into that place, and he went down and he'd put his hand over their face and he cut their throat. And he went down and he come to this one guy that slept in there. His name was Hernandez, and he slept with his eyes open. And it scared that German and jumped back and hit the bunk. And of course, when he hit the bunk, the guy on the bunk come to, and of course everybody in there shot him. He thought he was shot with a machine gun. He probably had so many bullet holes in him. But that was and they'd wondered how he'd gotten in there, and then they figured he was probably a parachute and had dropped in there, because right at the end of the fort there was a drop off right down there, and you couldn't come up that drop off. It was so steep. We was back at our unit, and I guess Lieutenant Madsen, he was our yard foreman or superintendent or whatever you want to call him. Anyway, he come down there and he said, "Well, we won't have to do that crap no more." He says, "It's over with." And so you mean we're through, we can go home? He said, "You ain't going home yet." But it's true. Yeah. I guess it was a fun thing, I reckon. Everybody has to go through something. No, they didn't even know I was home till I come in the door. And she probably said, "Oh God, no, he come back." Well, it used to mean something, but it seemed like anymore it don't amount to a bunch. You don't see people hang their flags out no more, and then and the parades and things like that are almost gotten to where they're obsolete. They don't have them anymore, and you're a veteran, so what? They don't mean nothing no more, and they're not respected, and a lot of schools they don't even teach you nothing about it, even in history and things like that. But I've got grandkids that are in school, and they don't teach anything about that in their school. And he's growing up. One of them is, and I asked him. I said, "What do you think you want to do?" He says, "When I grow up, I'm gonna go to West Point." Well, you don't see many kids that even think about nothing like that anymore. And people don't have any more respect for you because you're a veteran than they do for anybody else. They don't think nothing about it. You ain't nothing to them no more, just past tense. I've been in the grocery store sometimes. I wear that little old cap there, and sometimes every once in a while I'll come up and thank you. And one time I was walking down and my shoe come untied, and I was trying to tie my shoe, and I have a problem tying my shoes. But 2 or 3 people came by and saw I was struggling trying to get my shoe tied, and this black woman come up there, and she says, "Can I do that?" And I said, "Well, I sure would appreciate it." And she tied my shoe. She says, "That's the least I can do for what you did."